Happy November. How exciting. I need a quick show of hands. Who is in pre-Christmas mode already? 1, 2, 3. Okay, not that many. You are in the minority. And when I wrote my intro to this the other day, I was like, absolutely, you cannot do Christmas pre-25th of November. It's not, in my opinion, it's not right. But then something happened the other day. And I was in the car with my children, and we were driving back from the Arboretum. Lovely time we had. We listened to Christmas songs on the way back. I don't know what it was about it. There was nothing Christmassy about it at the Arboretum, but we just needed it. Just needed it. And I was like, boys, whatever you do, don't tell your father. And they were like, okay, that's fine. I was in the house last night, and Andrew went, I've heard something. And I was like, what? He's like, you listened to the pre-Christmas playlist, didn't you? And I was like, yes, I did. I'm so sorry. I know it's really early, but I just needed it. So I'm kind of in between both camps. I'm not sure I can do it again now before the 25th of November, but I make no promises on that one. So I don't know how you find Sunday mornings before you walk in here, but in my world, they're quite chaotic. So I think sometimes we need just a moment to have like 5 seconds of just deep breathing, just to recenter ourselves. Feel free to take those breaths now, just to give ourselves a bit of time and a bit of space to just remember where we are, remember what we're doing, and remember why we're here. So, as Toby said, my name is Helen. I am married to Andrew, who is currently teaching in 3s and 4s across the road. We have been here at St. Nick's since January 2020. Just to clarify, I'm Welsh, in case you're wondering what the beautiful exotic accent is that you're hearing. I don't want people to think that, spend most of the time while I'm talking thinking about, where is she from? It must be so far away. But no, just across the bridge. So me and my husband, I've got 3 boys, aged 11, 7, and 3. Yep. And I say that mainly to explain the grey hair. It really is needed. It really is needed. Yeah, I'm getting some great nods from people who have got 3 boys. So as Toby said, we are into week 2 of our new Galatians series. And last week, Toby kicked it off by looking at chapter 1 and looking at and exploring this letter that Paul has written to the Galatians church, and focusing last week on grace and that amazing grace that we receive. And I was thinking that we sang that song after Toby spoke last week, and I was like, it is amazing. And I think we forget that how amazing it is, how in awe of grace we should be. And Toby then challenged us last week with computer science, of all things. That was a bit of a curveball. I enjoyed it, though. Of GIGO, giving out what you give out. What is it again? GIGO? Remind me, Toby. Grace in, grace out. That's it. Grace in, grace out. So a bit of computer science to go away and think about, and just challenge us on receiving that grace of God really well, and well enough that we are in turn able to give that out. So today we're going to look at Galatians 2, verse 15 to 21. So if you've got a Bible with you, please turn to Galatians 2. If not, it's going to come up on the screen. This is when everyone gets to test my reading abilities. They're not great. So it says, we who are Jews by birth and not sinful Gentiles know that a person is not justified by the works of law, but by faith in Jesus Christ. So we too have put our faith in Christ Jesus, that we may be justified by faith in Christ, and not by the works of the law. Because by the works of the law, no one will be justified. But if, in seeking to be justified in Christ, we Jews find ourselves among the sinners, doesn't that mean that Christ promotes sin? Absolutely not. If I rebuild what I destroyed, then I really would be a lawbreaker. For through the law I died to the law, that I might live for God. I have been crucified with Christ and no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Spirit of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing. Now, when I was looking into Galatians, there's quite a split view amongst the commentators and theologians on this letter. It's a bit Marmite, which is quite interesting. Some people absolutely love it and find that it's just beautiful and it's impassioned and it's bold. And other people are like, it's a lot. It is a lot. And if you read it, I read this a couple of weeks ago and I was like, oh gosh, that's quite a lot, isn't it? In just those few. But it is bold and it is impassioned and it is full of such rich truths from Paul. So last week, again, Toby introduced us to the Galatian churches, and we find this really bold, impassioned letter from Paul because he is determined for these churches not to lose sight of the calling that God had given them, that they remained true to that faith that they had been, that they had encountered and that had saved them. And Paul is writing this to remind them that this justification, this being made right with God, is through faith that God provides through Jesus and Jesus alone. And there's a lot of tension that was surrounding this debate at the time because they were, as Jesus had died and risen, as the message got out, you were finding that these Jewish believers had then found Christ. But we've got all the old way of the law mixed with the new grace and faith. And as this is spreading through the world, we're now getting, Gentile believers. And so there was this split in the church, and there was a split with the Jews. And they were trying to figure out, actually, how is this going to work? How is this all going to work out? So there was tension that existed in the church, which is kind of relieving to know that existed before. But there was this divide. And so this is what Paul is trying to combat now, this divide of this teaching that was coming into the churches that he had established in the Gentile world. And so for Paul, who was an absolute staunch law follower, he was proud of the fact, and we heard it last week, that he obtained the law. He held that to a really high standard. But for Paul discovered in this encounter that he had with Jesus that it was only through Jesus that the law could ever be fulfilled. So in this freedom that Paul had discovered, a fulfillment of law, he sets free the others that he tells. So he tells others, he tells the Gentiles, this is the freedom that you are offered. Join me in this freedom. And it's nothing that we can obtain for ourselves. We can't obtain this faith for ourselves. We can't obtain this grace and this salvation and this joy for ourselves in our own works. So this is where we find Paul now. He is impassioned, begging the Galatian churches to go back and see what he taught them from the beginning. And so really this letter is about identity as well. So we've got the grace that we understand and is amazing, but also it challenges, who are they? So at this point where we find the Galatian churches, that it's being questioned, who are they? Because you've got these other people coming in to try and tell them how to live, and they've got to decide, who are we really? What do we believe? What defines us as a church? And it's a really good question for us all today. And it's not an easy one. Who are you? Who am I? Who are we today as the church? And do you know what? Knowing who we are can bring us comfort. It can bring us confidence. We can feel secure and assured, and we kind of walk differently. But when that's questioned at the very core, it shakes us and it tilts everything off its axis. So there are so many different ways we can define ourselves, right? If you're thinking about now, right, I want you to think about someone you're going to meet. What is the first thing you're going to tell them about yourself? Because actually, we might base that off the jobs that we do. Given the situation, if that's a networking event, I hate networking. Oh, gross. I usually like to find the one person I vaguely know and just sit with them the whole time. You're probably going to talk about what you do, if that's the situation you find yourself in. But maybe we define ourselves by our careers. And that's okay. You've been given a gift and you're doing something fantastic, I'm sure. And so maybe you define yourself by that. Maybe it's about the families that you're from or your upbringing, where you grew up. Now, I'm not a Welsh nationalist, but I am incredibly proud to be Welsh. And despite news reports, I am also incredibly proud to be from Newport. That was a bigger laugh than I was expecting. And I work for Newport Local Authority, I work in community safety, and so I know a lot of the worst things about Newport that there could be to know. But I still love it. I'm still very proud that that's where I'm from. So it does define a part of me. Maybe it's what age bracket you fall into. And we've all been there where you're filling out, I don't know, like a census or a bit of information about yourself. And you've got to click the next bracket. You know, when you've just changed that 1 year and now the bracket doesn't start with a 2 anymore. I found that really upsetting because it was like 20-something to 34 and you're like, yay, I still fit. And then it changes and then the last number ends with a 4. And yeah, it's just, I found it really difficult. Maybe it's our relationship status. Maybe, are we married? Are we engaged? Are we dating? Are we single? You know that saying, single as a Pringle? Can anyone explain that to me? Because I don't know about you. I'm not eating 1 Pringle at a time. No? Does anyone in here genuinely take out a Pringle, a single Pringle from a pack and eat that? No. See? You do. That's very interesting. Is it to savor it more? I won't question you too much on it. It's just very interesting. Yeah, okay. I'm more of like a 3 or 4, like a good wedge. It does become quite difficult. And you know when you're eating salt and vinegar wins and they like change the color of your lips? Anyway, I've digressed massively. But maybe you identify yourself as single. And I know that in the world today, there is a lot of different debates and questions and a lot in the world about how we identify ourselves. But you will have so many different ways that you will use to identify yourself. And what's ironic is that those things that we use to identify ourselves actually shape who we are. Our job shapes our worldview. It shapes my worldview. Where we've been brought up, who we've been brought up by shapes our view. Whether we're in a relationship or not, it shapes our view on things in the world. It shapes our view of the outside and the inside. And if you're a millennial, like me, I'm proud. I still do this with my hands for a heart. I've been practicing the other way, but I can't do it. Now, the stuff that millennials have lived through before we're 40 sounds like the storyline for Grey's Anatomy. I'm just going to read some of them out if you identify as a millennial. So that's anyone born between 1981 and 96/7. You can just squeeze in if you want to. Terrorist attacks, 10 UK military battlefronts, the internet, Channel 5. Does anyone else remember Channel 5 becoming a thing? Yeah, it's weird that was. Social media, the Great Recession, a housing crisis, a global pandemic, and a cost of living crisis. Now, often we will live through events and factors on the outside that will try and impact us on the inside. We are not immune to these external forces, much like the Galatian church at this moment. They weren't immune to the external forces around them, trying to tell them who to be and what to do. And this can disrupt us. This can change our view. This can change how we feel about ourselves in the world. It can change our vision and our calling. And for the Galatian church, they were having people come in and declaring that they were heretics because they weren't following the old traditions of the Jewish faith before coming to see Jesus as Messiah. Now, in preparation for this morning, I did a little experiment. I wanted to check no one declared me a heretic before I came and spoke, because I thought that would be quite important. But I sent out a little questionnaire to some people in my phone. I created a little Microsoft form. Always fun. I absolutely love a Microsoft form. And I created one of those, and I wrote in there, Helen is ... Describe me in 1 word. 1 word. And I was like, please be really honest, but no swearing. Please be really honest. It's completely anonymous. So I went through then my WhatsApp list of contacts. And I saw in there, I was like, right, okay, I'll do a broadcast list and I'll send it out to everyone. I don't want to do a group, that'll get complicated. So I sent it out and I was going through my contact list and I was like, I don't even know who this this person is. So I genuinely don't remember who it is. And I've got people in there who are just under like the most absurd things, like where I met them. So I was going through the list and I was like, right, I'm going to be really like deliberate here in some way. And I'm going to do a mix. So people I know really well, people I see on a daily, weekly basis, and then people who maybe I haven't seen for years. And I was looking through it, and like some people I picked, I genuinely hadn't seen for about 10 years. Now, it was really interesting to get the responses back. I had a couple of people being like, is this really you? Or is it a scam? I was like, no, it's really me. And they were like, okay, we'll do it. I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to steal your money. You're okay. That showed me a lot as well about that, where those generations fitted in, by the way. It was a lot of the older millennials that replied with that. They were very suspicious. Any of my Gen Zers, they didn't ask that question at all. And so I thought, right, okay, went out to 132 people. 132 people. And I was like, right, let's see what they say. And I'm like, please, genuinely, be honest. Be honest about this. And so I had 71 replies back. And I've got a little word cloud picture of the things that came back. Right? Now, I'm not showing you this to brag. I was really disappointed. I'm going to be really honest. I was really disappointed because people were too nice. So obviously on there's lovely things: thoughtful, kind, faithful, creative. I don't know, I'm not that creative, but that's nice that someone sees me like that. Busy. Also, can I just say, if you did respond to this, thank you very much. But also, if you responded with more than one word, the amount of work you added to my day, it was much more difficult. I'm not going to look into interactions because I can tell you who they are by what they wrote. So anyway, there's loads of different things in it. Crayola, I will explain that because that's a bit weird. But basically, one of my oldest friends, we used to sit in the back of our maths class, and I had like these Crayola pencils that just had like different pictures on them. They were like really childish, but we were in like GCSE years. And we always got told off for talking, but I never got moved. The teacher never thought it was me. It was brilliant. So that's that. And there was one on there that came in quite last minute. And it's really small because it was only one, and it was unfocused. Now, out of all those words on there, can you guess which one I have decided to fixate on? Not the ones that are nice and big, but the really tiny, unfocused one. Now, the reason I am drawn to this one particularly is because it best matches what I think about myself. So the world can see me in lots of different ways. And so there's a psychological tool called the Johari window, and it was created in 1955 to help communication. So you do an exercise, and it's split into quadrants, and you do an exercise where you kind of just put adjectives in as to who you think you are, and other people contribute, and you put them in little windows. So it's kind of that. It's a bit of a kind of 360 reflection. And so I thought, actually, in contrast, I'm going to create myself a little word cloud about things I think about myself. And so I've got that one now as well. Okay, hilarious, because I think I am. I laugh at myself more than anyone else laughs at me. What else? Unfit. Oh my gosh. I say it to myself at least 4 times a day when I'm walking upstairs. I'm so unfit. Lazy, because I am. Scared, because I often am. Yeah, so that's just a really honest reflection of the things I think about myself. So you can understand why I've focused on the, ironically, unfocused part of that feedback. And I think it's because generally I am, and it makes me wonder actually if that person who's written that is someone I actually really genuinely know really, really, really well. And I started questioning whether I'd written it myself. So our identity can come in so many different forms. And if we think of it like hats, we put on all these different hats given whatever situation we're in, like the weather. We're going to wear a warm hat, a cold hat. Like, where am I going and what version of myself am I taking into this situation? So our identity can be so muddled around us for different places, different times, different people. However, God, unlike those around us, sees all of who we are. Every part. It doesn't see us in isolation, but sees us as a whole. Those word clouds are based on people who see me as they see me. That is a different version to who that other person sees me as, because not that I'm a different person, but to them I am a different person because I serve a different purpose for those people. And so God sees all of us, those multifaceted, different angles that make us who we are. In Hebrews 4, verse 13, it actually says, "Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account." And this Paul in this letter is urging them, don't just listen to those voices. Let's remember the grace and the goodness that we have been given. Come back to the simplicity of his voice. So whilst it's important that we understand who we are, we understand how other people see us and perceive us, we too need to shape ourselves like Paul is urging the Galatian church to do, focused on God and what he says. And so what does God say about us? What does God claim that we are? So in 1 Corinthians 15:10, it says, "But by the grace of God, I am what I am." So I put another little word cloud together as well, based on the words that God in the Bible uses to describe us. So I don't know if we can see that. There we go. Chosen, accepted, loved, called, forgiven, free, disciples, co-heirs, redeemed, children, healed, holy. These are the things that God says about us. Now, unlike those other words that we've seen, only God can say this about us in all truth, because he knows all of who we are. There's a female writer, professor, researcher called Brené Brown. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's got a lot of books. They're great, a lot of social studies to understand how people think. And she's actually just done a study on fitting in versus belonging and what that looks like and how different it is. And this is a quote from her research, and it says, "Fitting in is about addressing a situation, assessing a situation, and becoming who you need to be in order to be accepted. Belonging, on the other hand, doesn't require us to change who we are. It requires us to be who we are." And that's what God offers us. With others, we often just try to fit in. We try to be who's needed in that moment. But with God, it's that deep, true belonging of who we are. That is our identity, complete and whole in God. And Paul's letter isn't saying to the Galatian church, you need to change who you are. He's saying you need to do what you were originally called to do. Be free. To focus on the one who died to set you free in all grace and love and compassion. But it's challenging to us to just be us, because pride kind of gets in the way. And the reality is we don't get a lot of recognition for just being us. Often it's very linked to what we do, what we contribute to the world. Let's look at the honours lists, for example. They're based on contributions to culture or science or society or charity work or something like that. Frank's not getting an honour, an OBE, for just being the best Frank he could be. So we live in a world that is skewed towards what we can give out. But what Paul is saying to the Galatian church, grace is about who he is and who he has declared you to be. And that is enough. I want to look at another story in the Bible. Sorry, I like to throw Bible passages at you. I feel it's the right place to do it, but, in Luke 10, verse 38 to 42. And now, what I would like you to do when we're reading this story is based on an Ignatian practice. So St. Ignatius was a theologian and an author, and he practiced this. In reading the Bible, he practiced reading it over several times, but trying to find a different perspective in it every time. So I want you to listen to this, read along with it, and see who do you identify most with in this story? Which perspective are you taking on? Which character are you in this story? So it says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or needed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her." So now, who was it that you identified most with in that story? For me, it's always Martha. Because I've always got a little thing in my head that, maybe it's because I think of myself as lazy, I've always got a thing in my head of, well, no, we need to do. Like that's got to be done, that's got to happen, and that's got to be made right, and that's got to look right, and and it all comes around to that. And actually, Jesus just calls us to sit at his feet. And this is, again, what Paul is trying to remind them of, that grace is sufficient to just sit at his feet and simply be. We are known, we are seen, we are loved, we are accepted through the grace that Jesus provided. We're none of those things by what we do, by how much we put out. That doesn't make us loved and accepted. The world tells us that that's what happens, but that's not what God says. We are loved, accepted, called, and saved by him and through him and by his grace alone. And so Paul is asking the Galatian believers again to find this freedom, to remember this freedom. And these words from Paul today can still be a key for us to freedom. What we say about ourselves matters. What other people think about us, it does matter. It shapes us, it informs us. But what God says about us completes us. It makes us whole. It takes all of those hats and it covers everything. And it makes all of those make sense. And so all of this is lovely and it's great and it's powerful, but it really is very dependent on who we say Jesus is. Who do we say he is? Because at the end of this, Paul says in chapter 2, verse 20 to 21, he says, "I have been crucified with Christ and no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing." So it matters who we say he is. The world might tell us that Jesus was a prophet, he was a good man, he was a bit crazy, he was a rebel, he was all of these things. But who do you today, in this moment, say that Christ is? Who is Jesus to you? In Matthew 16, verse 13 to 16, it says this: "When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea," I can't say that word, I'm so sorry, "he asked his disciples, 'Who do the people say the Son of Man is?' Jesus said, they replied, 'Some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets.' 'But what about you?' he asked. 'Who do you say I am?' Simon Peter answered, 'You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God.'" Now, perhaps you're sat in here and actually you've been a Christian and a follower of Jesus for a really long time. And we can do these things and we can get into a pattern and we can get all the stamps from coming to church every week, and that's fantastic. But maybe you've lost a touch of that joy that grace gives you. You've lost that spark of knowing that amazing grace is with you for now and forever. And that is enough. Perhaps actually in all the ways we've talked about God and faith and grace today, actually you don't know Jesus like that. But actually you feel a sense of longing, a sense of yearning, that you want to overcome that sense of earning. That actually you're fed up of just trying to earn something, but you're yearning for more. Actually, that is here for you today. You can receive that grace in full without having to do anything other than simply being who you are and being here today. And maybe actually it's just been a really long time since you've connected with God in a deep, meaningful way. And actually this series is teaching you that I am amazed by this grace. And I am desperate for him to define me and not have what the world says override that. So today is about focusing on these words of Paul, written to a group of people that were being pulled and pushed, being told what the world wants to say about them, to a group of people that felt a bit lost in their identity, but needed to be called back to the purpose. Our identity shapes who we are, what we live out, how we act. And so God wants it to be defined by him and his love and not by anything else.